Say what you will about it these days, but for a good long while, there was no escaping Simpson mania. And that's to be expected from a show that you could reasonably call the most influential animated show of all time. The Simpsons didn't used to be part of pop culture, they were pop culture. Of course, in recent years, the relevance of the show has dwindled a bit. A lot, but there is one thing that the show still gets right with alarming frequency. The future. Every website has some article on how The Simpsons has somehow been able to predict future events years, even decades in advance. Even Channel Frederator produced a video with some of these creepy coincidences last year. But several questions invade my mind, like, why? And how? I'm Jacob with Channel Frederator, and today we're going to be examining that exact question. How is The Simpsons so good at predicting the future? Is the writer's room full of witches? Is the Illuminati tapped into the show? Or is there a more reasonable explanation? Now, obviously, I'm not going to walk you through the actual possibility that the show is hiring witches or is part of some secret society and then taking you through the whole how does it hold up. Yeah, none of that. Obviously, that's not the case.
Or is it?
But that still doesn't change the fact that The Simpsons is well known for calling future events. Now, a lot of articles you see documenting these events will usually cite some predictions that are stretches at best. Hell, there's an entire subreddit dedicated to showcasing these weird side-by-sides in the form of r/Simpsons did it. And while these can be really funny, I don't think it's unfair to say that some of these are grasping. You know, side-by-sides like this horse meat gag supposedly predicting the UK horse meat scandal. That's like saying that I predicted that stupid Tide Pod meme because of that one time I accidentally ate soap. It's a long story. Also, don't do it, kids. But what's most fascinating are the Simpsons predictions that supposedly showcase actual future events. And there are quite a lot of these, so let's just run down a few of them for now. The first and most obvious one would be the show predicting the presidency of Donald Trump in the episode Bart to the Future, which premiered in 2000, 16 years before Trump was actually elected president.
We've inherited quite a budget crunch from President Trump.
There's also the matter of The Simpsons accurately predicting the end of the careers of the Vegas act Siegfried and Roy by having their iconic white tiger attack the show's version of the two in 1993, a full 10 years before the same thing happened to Roy Horn, ending his career. But we're nowhere near close to the end here. The show also somehow knew that the Walt Disney Company would acquire Fox in the episode When You Dish Upon a Star, which premiered in 1998, a full 19 years before the actual deal went through. So you might want to keep an eye out for an upcoming Ron Howard movie about a killer robot driving instructor that travels back in time for some reason.
His best friend's a talking pie. Sold!
Not to mention some of the really weird, obscure ones, like the show accurately predicting a future Nobel laureate. In the episode Elementary School Musical, which premiered in 2010, we see that Milhouse predicts Bengt Holmstrom to win the Nobel Prize for Economics, only to have the real thing happen just 6 years later in 2016. And golly gee, wouldn't you know it, during the production of this episode, it happened again. Last month at the end of the Pyeongchang Olympics, the US won their first ever gold medal in curling against Sweden. Congratulations, by the way. But guess what?
Simpsons did it! Simpsons did it!
Again in 2010 in the episode Boy Meets Curl, where Homer and Marge win an Olympic gold medal in curling. A classic, relatable Simpsons storyline. Now, those are some weirdly, specifically accurate predictions. But we don't really have any theory to go after this with. We only really have the question, why? There's no guarantee that any of these events should have come true, so what's going on here? I mean, there is an actual wacky conspiracy theory about Simpsons creator Matt Groening being a Freemason and putting subtle hints throughout episodes about how they run the world and actually facilitate all these future events, but I'm fresh out of literal tinfoil hats on this one. Contrary to this show's name, literal crackpot conspiracy theories are a little too much. My only weapons here are smug skepticism and this pen that I don't really use. And besides, there's no need to dive into this rabbit hole when there are way better and more realistic explanations about why The Simpsons are right all the time. So, let me tell you about a guy named Nostradamus. He was a French apothecary who eventually turned to an interest in the occult and, you know, prophesizing stuff, even if he never really considered himself to be a prophet. Even so, ever since his death in 1566, he's gone down in history as one of the most reputable seers to have lived, at least in Western civilization. But of course, the man's been met with his share of posthumous heat. And a lot of the criticisms laid against oracles like him can also be applied to the line of thinking that The Simpsons can just as well predict the future. First of all, both Nostradamus and The Simpsons word their predictions very vaguely. Nostradamus, when writing out most of the prophecies he's known for in the book Les Prophéties, are written in French quatrains, with intentionally vague and flowery language. Not to mention that his predictions were supposedly based on astrology, and yet very few of his predictions were dated. Furthermore, discrepancies in translations from the Middle French his quatrains were written in, and a lack of consensus on what Nostradamus was even talking about is another point of criticism against him. And none of this is helped by the amount of quotations you'll find online that are either straight up fictitious or misattributions that were written years after he died. On the Simpsons side, their predictions obviously weren't intentional prophecies, so I can't really fault them for being vague or anything. But it does seem like people's perception of the Simpsons' foresight and even oracles like Nostradamus seem to be a result of those two dreaded words: confirmation bias. When it comes to things like predicting the future, we're much more likely to accept and internalize the stuff that was right, or close enough to it, rather than the stuff that was completely wrong. Kinda like horoscopes. Apologies to every astrologist out there. Do you know how many times the world has been predicted to end? Not just by Nostradamus, but by every oracle and seer out there? Granted, some of you may argue that the world has kind of ended, but certainly not in the same way that these prophecies detailed. Here's one from our pal Nostradamus. The year 1999, 7 months, from the sky will come the great king of terror to resuscitate the great king of the Mongols before and after Mars reigns by good luck. July 1999, mark your calendars everyone. As for The Simpsons, the same line of thinking applies. Granted, there doesn't seem to be any kind of statute of limitations on The Simpsons prophecies, so technically any of them could still come true. But for now, here are some examples of some of the stuff that the show has gotten patently wrong. Just the episode Lisa's Wedding shows us a future that, while familiar to our own, still has a lot of differences, like holographic foliage and plant life being a common sight, Big Ben being replaced with a malfunctioning digital display, yes I know that Big Ben is the name of the bell and not the clock, don't at me, and landline phones still being any kind of relevant. But enough about what The Simpsons has gotten wrong, what about the stuff that The Simpsons has gotten right? That should be more difficult to explain, right? Well, maybe not. It's not like The Simpsons writing staff is just a bunch of manatees pushing balls around. It's all run by humans, and humans have a knack for being able to recognize patterns and extrapolate from them. It's what most other oracles have done in the past when predicting the future. The Simpsons has just done it unintentionally a few times. In a show where pretty much every moment, every joke, every sight gag has the possibility of being called the next bold future prediction, the show is bound to get some things right every now and then when it comes to the bigger stuff. We all knew who Donald Trump was in 2000. He wasn't exactly some reclusive public figure. In 1989, he was even used as a major plot point in the most underrated comic strip of all time, Bloom County. He's been parodied in pop culture for decades. The writer of Bart to the Future, Dan Greeny, has said in the past that the supposed prediction of President Trump was just a joke because it seemed like the most ridiculous result for a presidential election at the time. A sentiment that fellow writer Mike Reiss has also voiced in interviews. And it's not like these are out of left field jokes or comments either. The Simpsons has always focused on social commentary, especially aiming their sights at American pop culture. It's constantly poking fun in its own cynical way, and it always has. I mean, take the prediction about Siegfried and Roy. For an act about two dudes and a horrifyingly dangerous wild animal, having the tiger attack one of them seems like the obvious thing to do when going for an irreverent joke. It's just unfortunate that life imitates art and the same thing happened in real life 10 years later. But that aside, a lot of the predictions that the show makes can also be seen as commentary on events that the public consciousness seems to have mostly forgotten about. For example, the 1994 episode Lisa on Ice apparently shows a stunning prediction of how autocorrect would function in the 21st century. But in context, this supposed prediction was actually a joke about the Apple Newton, a product that was released in 1993 and heavily criticized for its flimsy handwriting recognition software. It was also heavily criticized because the Apple Newton was a terrible product. Another well-known predictions The Simpsons made was a video phone technology, which would be impressive if video phones hadn't already been predicted by literally everyone else on Earth ever before they existed. What about the prediction that Disney would buy Fox? Well, When You Dish Upon a Star premiered in 1998, and Disney buying assets to add to their collection isn't exactly a new practice for them. In fact, 2 years before this episode in 1996, Disney bought Capital Cities/ABC Incorporated, who in turn owned ESPN, so in the blink of an eye, Disney suddenly acquired two major television networks. Seems natural for the The Simpsons to take a jab at the prospect of Fox, the corporation that owns them, eventually being part of the Disney machine. After all, Fox has always been quite the punching bag on The Simpsons. And because Disney is Disney, that joke ended up coming true. Another supposed prediction that The Simpsons made was back in 2008 regarding faulty voting machines, which of course were an issue in the following election between Obama and Mitt Romney in 2012. But the voting machine gag The Simpsons made in 2008 was more than likely birthed from similar fears over the increase in voting machines used in the 2004 election between George W. Bush and John Kerry. Back in 2004, the state of California even requested that 15,000 voting machines not be used in the election due to past flaws that the manufacturing company never told anyone about. Even the prediction of the Donald Trump presidency was based in the past. The episode Bart to the Future was produced in the year 2000, which just so happens to be the same year that Donald Trump ran for the presidency the first time as a third-party candidate. So not even that was pulled out of thin air. There was real-world precedent to base this on. But okay, what about when there's no real-world precedent? What about the predictions they made when they had nothing to go on? Like the Nobel laureate. Well, in terms of predicting the Nobel Prize winner in economics, the writers of Matt Groening's shows are well documented to be super clever academics who make esoteric, nerdy jokes and references all the time. I have no idea if there are any economists on the writing staff, but I definitely wouldn't put it past the writers to put enough research into this to make an educated guess about the world's leading economists. Also, it sure helps that they made 20 predictions about possible Nobel Prize winners in the episode, and of those 20, 3 of them have won Nobel Prizes since 2010. Yeah, William Moore and Ben Feringo won the Nobel Prize for Chemistry in 2014 and 2016 respectively. I'm not sure why Holmstrom gets all of the glory in these internet articles. I really gotta hand it to them. That's a success rate of 15% over the course of almost 10 years. But what about the most recent Simpsons prediction, at least at the time of writing this episode? America beating Sweden at curling for Olympic gold. How could the Simpsons have guessed this? Well, if we break this down, you might find that this wasn't actually that odd a prediction. The episode Boy Meets Curl was conceptualized as an episode that could air during the 2010 Winter Games, so that explains why they're at the Olympics. As for why curling is the sport in the episode, Homer competing in bobsledding was originally pitched, but writer Rob Lazebnik chose to focus on an episode about Homer and Marge. And curling is one of the only events that they could feasibly compete in together and do well. I mean, they could try figure skating, but that might be too unbelievable even for The Simpsons. And this is just me talking, but curling could have also been chosen because at the time, the US had no Olympic gold medals in curling, which would immediately stack the odds against our heroes. But then, why would they beat Sweden at the Olympics? Why not just have them go hard and have the US beat Canada, who is historically the most winningest country in curling events, even when the episode was made? This is pure speculation, but it's likely because the episode already took place in Canada, and having Homer, Marge, Agnes, and Skinner face the Canadian team would go against the whole worldwide mentality that the Olympics promotes. Oversaturating the episode with Canada would have just been unnecessary and gotten redundant, just like Canada in real life. But after Canada, what country was at the time and still is the second most decorated in Olympic curling? Sweden. Seems like a no-brainer to have them as their opponent instead. Of course, some elements of the episode were inaccurate. They predicted the win would happen at the 2010 Olympic Games when they didn't actually happen until the 2018 Olympic Games. And the medal was for mixed doubles curling, which incidentally didn't even exist at the Olympics until this year at the 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Games. Another minor prediction from convenience that came true. And lastly, it was the men's team that won in real life. But based on how this episode was conceptualized and moving forward to dodge writing issues, it seems totally reasonable that the writers would stumble into this prediction. And finally, there's also the possibility that The Simpsons aren't predicting the future, but they're informing it. Much in the same way that you could argue that shows like Star Trek have inspired several real-life technologies. Just watch an episode of Star Trek and see how many futuristic sci-fi gadgets they use that are similar to some of the stuff that's widely available today. Star Trek is one of the most influential sci-fi TV shows to have aired, so there's no wonder that it helped dictate the direction of the future. But The Simpsons' reach in their prime definitely rivaled Star Trek, so could the same be true for them? Absolutely. As an example, The Simpsons actually did inform the future during the development of the iPhone. Remember that Apple Newton Eat Up Martha clip? According to the former senior vice president of iOS software, Scott Forstall, that clip became a running gag at Apple's offices as a reminder to get the keyboard functionality of the iPhone just right, and to not litter people's phones with unnecessary and incorrect autocorrect. I mean, autocorrect is still an absolute ducking dumpster fire, but but at least the sentiment was there. That clip wasn't really predicting the future as much as it was helping shape the future based on its own cynical lens of the past. So for some of those smaller predictions here and there, like this one about a lemon tree being stolen, who's to say that the seeds for some of these things may have been subconsciously planted into people's heads by The Simpsons? It's a lot of fun to pretend that The Simpsons has some sort of supernatural ability to let us know what's going to happen in the future. But obviously they don't have that kind of power, and even if they did, do you really think they would make it that obvious? The Simpsons isn't great at predicting the future so much as it is great at just understanding the culture in which it inhabits. Combine that with the fact that the show's been around for almost 30 years, it's unavoidable that The Simpsons would be right more than a few times. But this isn't a phenomenon unique to The Simpsons either. Lately, people have started to notice some stuff that Family Guy has apparently predicted in the past. But since we didn't really enter this episode with a hypothesis in mind, well, actually, I guess we kind of did. So, on the plausibility meter, I'm going to rate the conspiracy of The Simpsons hiring witches or being part of some secret society 0.5 cans of Duff beer out of 5. 0.5, of course, because I'm 99% sure that this isn't the case, but what if it's true? But what do you think? Why do you think The Simpsons has developed this reputation for clairvoyance? Got any Simpsons future predictions we didn't mention? Or, if you're watching this in the future, any predictions that have come true since this video got posted? And of course, what's your all-time favorite episode of The Simpsons? Mine is Cape Fear because even if you haven't seen the movie the whole episode is parodying, it's still got the most laughs of any episode. Be sure to let us know your thoughts in the comments and also let us know of any conspiracies you'd like us to take a look at in a later episode. In the meantime, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Channel Frederator, and click that little bell icon next to the subscribe button to become part of our notification squad. Once again, I'm Jacob with Channel Frederator, and of course, always remember and never forget, Frederator loves you.